Hi, I'm Anthony Perlas, and this is the Daily Flux, the place to be for your aesthetic journey. Today is March 27th, 2020, and we are on day who knows what in the coronavirus. I haven't been keeping in track, but you know what? I'm gonna start a fucking podcast. Yeah, let's gonna fucking do it. Okay, so I'm just gonna start this. There's this article by The Atlantic, posted 2 days ago. It was by Ed Yong, How the Pandemic Will End. So it begins like this. 3 months ago, no one knew that the C- SARS-CoV-2 existed. Now the virus has spread to almost every country, infecting at least 446,000 people whom we know about, and many more whom we do not. It has crashed economies and broken healthcare systems, filled hospitals, and emptied public spaces. It has separated people from their workplaces and their friends. It has disrupted modern society on a scale that most living people have never witnessed. It has disrupted modern society. Soon, most everyone in the United States will know someone who has been infected, like World War II or the 911 attacks. This pandemic has already imprinted itself upon the nation's psyche. A global pandemic of this scale was inevitable. In recent years, hundreds of health experts have written books, white papers, and op-eds warning of the possibility. Bill Gates has even been telling everyone who would listen, including the 18 million viewers of his TED Talk, what? This has already been predicted and you did nothing about it? What the fuck, motherfucker? In 2018, I wrote a story for The Atlantic. I'm just quoting the newspaper here. So the guy's name Young, Ed Young or something, arguing that America was not ready for the pandemic that would eventually come. In October, the Johns Hopkins Center for the Health Security War Game. What might happen if a new coronavirus swept the globe? And then one did. Hypotheticals became reality. What if became now what? So, now what? In the late hours of last Wednesday, which now feels like the distant past, I was talking about the pandemic with a pregnant friend who was days away from her due date. We realized that her child might not be the only first of a new cohort who are born into society profoundly altered by the COVID 19. We decided to call them Generation C. So all you motherfuckers, my kids is going to be a Generation C. So what happens to the kids who are born after the coronavirus? Now that is the question. But going back to the fucking article, as we'll see, Gen C's live will be shaped by the choices made in the upcoming weeks and by the losses we suffer as a result. But first, a brief reckoning on the Global Health Security Index, a report card that grades every country on its pandemic preparedness. The United States has a score of 83.5, the world's highest. Rich, strong, developed, America is supposed to be the readiest of all the nations. That illusion has now been shattered. Despite many months of advance warning as the virus spread in other countries, when America was finally tested by the COVID 19, it has failed. No matter what, a virus like SARS CoV-2 was going to test the resilience of even the most well-equipped health systems, says Nahid Badelia, an infectious disease physician at the Boston University School of Medicine. More transmittable and fatal than the seasonal influenza, the coronavirus is also stealthier, spreading from one host to another for several days before triggering obvious symptoms. To contain such a pathogen, nations must develop a test and use it to identify infected people, isolate them, and trace those they've been had in contact with. This is what South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong did to tremendous effect. It is what the United States did not. As my colleagues Alexis Madrigal and Robinson Mayer have reported, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention developed and distributed a faulty test in February. Independent labs created alternatives but were mired in bureaucracy from the FDA. In a crucial month, when the American caseload shot in the tens of thousands, only hundreds of people were tested. That a biomedical powerhouse like the US should so thoroughly fail to create a very simple diagnostic test was quite literally unimaginable. I'm not aware of any simulations that I or others have run where we considered a failure of testing, says Alexander Phelan of the Georgetown University, who works on legal and policy issues related to infectious disease. The testing fiasco was the original sin of the America's pandemic failure. The single flaw that undermined every countermeasure, If the country could have accurately tracked the spread of the virus, hospitals could have executed their pandemic plans, girding themselves by allocating treatment rooms, ordering extra supplies, tagging in personnel, or assisting specific facilities to deal with COVID-19 cases. None of that happened. Instead, a healthcare system that already runs close to full capacity and that was already challenged by a severe flu season was suddenly faced with a virus that had been left to spread untracked through communities around the country. Overstretched, hospitals became overwhelmed. Basic protective equipment such as masks, gowns, and gloves began to run out. Beds went so follow, as will the ventilators that provide oxygen to patients whose lungs are besieged by the virus. With little room to surge during a crisis, America's healthcare system operates on an assumption that unaffected states can help beleaguered ones in an emergency. The ethic works for localized disasters, such as hurricanes and wildfires, but not for the pandemic that is now in all 50 states. Cooperation has given way to the competition. Some worried hospitals have brought out large quantities of supplies in the way that panicked consumers have brought out toilet paper. Partly that's because the White House is a ghost town of scientific expertise. A pandemic preparedness office that was part of the National Security Council dissolved in 2018. On January 28, Luciana Borio, who was part of the team, urged the government to act to prevent the American epidemic, and specifically to work with the private sector to develop fast, easy diagnostic tests. But with that office shuttered, those warnings were published in the Wall Street Journal. Rather than speaking into the president's ear, instead of springing into action, America sat idle. Wow, this is going to be a long fucking article, so brace yourself, guys. Brace yourself, motherfuckers. We're about a quarter done, so you can take a break now. Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, we're back on it. Okay, let's do it, motherfucker. Holy shit. I don't even think I have the attention to read this whole fucking... My whole fucking podcast is going to be about this Atlantic pose. But you know what? Let's do it. Rudderless, blindsided, lethargic, and uncoordinated, America has mishandled the COVID-19 crisis to a substantial worse degree than what every health expert I've spoken with had feared. Much worse, said Ron Klain, who coordinated the U.S. response to the West African Ebola outbreak in 2014. Beyond any expectations we had, said Lauren Stour, who worked on disaster preparedness at Johns Hopkins Medicine. As an American, I'm horrified, said Seth Berkley, who heads gave the Vaccine Alliance. The U.S. may end up with the worst outbreak in the industrialized world. The next months, italicizes 1, having fallen behind, it will be difficult but not impossible for the United States to catch up. To an extent, the near future is set because COVID-19 is a slow and long illness. People who were influenced several days ago will only start showing symptoms now. Even if they isolate themselves in the meantime, some of those people will enter intensive care units in early April. As of last weekend, the nation had 17,000 confirmed cases, but the actual number was probably somewhere between 60,000 and 245,000. What? Numbers are now starting to rise exponentially. As of Wednesday morning, the official case count was 54,000, and the actual case count is unknown. Healthcare workers are already seeing worrying signs. Dwindling equipment, growing numbers of patients and doctors and nurses who are themselves becoming infected. Italy and Spain offer grim warnings about the future. Hospitals are out of room, supplies, and staff, unable to treat or save everyone. Doctors have been forced into the unthinkable, rationing care to patients who are more or less likely to survive while letting others die. Good. I mean, not good, but you gotta be smart, man. Like, if you kind of let the strong die and let the weak live, how the fuck is the nation gonna run? I mean, ideally, we want to save everyone, but, just think about it in your head. You're going to save the older people. The younger people die. So who's going to run the country 40 years from now? 50 years from now? The U.S. has fewer hospital beds per capita than Italy. A study released by a team of Imperial College London concluded that if a pandemic is left unchecked, those beds will all be full by late April. By the end of June, for every available critical care bed, there will be roughly 15 COVID-19 patients in need of one. By the end of the summer, the pandemic will have directly killed 2.2 million Americans. Oh, that is so creepy. Ooh, talk about letting the bodies sit on the floor. I had this vision. I was like driving, and all these bodies were just in the street. So fuck that, man. That's not going to happen because within our minds interlink. We're going to fucking think that all this is going to be gone by April. Next week, it's going to be fucking gone. That's why we need to interlink our minds together. Have a unity of thought, and then we'll be good. We'll be good, fam. We got this, fam. Okay, Americans, notwithstanding those who will indirectly die as hospitals are unable to care for the usual slew of heart attacks, strokes, and car accidents. This is the worst case scenario. To avert it, 4 things need to happen, and quickly. The first and most important is to rapidly produce masks, gloves, and other personal protective equipment. If healthcare workers can't stay healthy, then the rest of the response will collapse. In some places, stockpiles are already so low that doctors are reusing masks between patients. What? What the fuck? Calling for donations from the public or suing their own homemade alternatives. These shortages are happening because the medical supplies are made to order independent Byzantine international supply chains that are currently straining and snapping. Hubei province in China, the epicenter of the pandemic, was also a manufacturing center of medical masks. That's smart. So everything were attacked by China. What the fuck? We're infiltrated or sending us masks infected by the virus? What the fuck? Well, technically we can just sterilize it before we use it, but in the U.S., the Strategic National Stockpile, the national leader of medical equipment, is already being developed especially to the hardest hit states. The stockpile is not inexhaustible, but it can buy some time. Donald Trump could use that time to invoke the Defense Production Act, launching a wartime effort in which American manufacturers switch to making medical equipment. But after invoking the act last Wednesday, Trump has failed to actually use it, reportedly due to lobbying from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the heads of major corporations. Some manufacturers are already rising to the challenge, but their efforts are piecemeal and unevenly distributed. One day we'll wake up to a story of doctors in City X who are operating with bandanas and a closet in City Y with masks piled into it, says Ali Khan, the Dean of Public Health of the University of Nebraska Medical Center. A massive logistics and supply chain operations is now needed across the country, says Thomas Inglesby of Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. This can't be managed by a small and inexperienced team scattered throughout the White House. The solution, he says, is to tag a Defense Logistics Agency, a 26,000-person group that prepares the U.S. military for overseas operation and that has assisted in the past public health crisis, including the 2014 Ebola outbreak. The agency can coordinate the second pressing need, a massive rollout of COVID-19 tests. These tests have been slow to arrive because of 5 separate shortages of masks to protect the people administering the tests, of nasopharyngeal swabs for collecting viral samples, of extraction kits from pulling the virus genetic material out of samples, of chemical reagents that are a part of those kits, and of trained people who can give out the tests. Many of these shortages are again due to strained supply chains. The U.S. relies on 3 manufacturers for extraction reagents, providing redundancy in case of any of them fails. But all of them failed in the face of unprecedented global demand. Meanwhile, London, Italy, the hardest hit place in Europe, houses one of the largest manufacturers of nasopharyngeal swabs. Great! So our manufacturers, Italy and China, have been attacked by the virus. So essentially everything we're going to get is fucked. So we are fucked. Not really. And 1 second. Okay, where are we at? Some shortages have been addressed. The FDA is now moving quickly to approve tests developed by private labs. At least one can deliver results in less than an hour, potentially allowing doctors to know the patient in front of them has COVID-19. The country is adding capacity on a daily basis, says Kelly Roblewski of the Association of Public Health Laboratories. On March 6, Trump said that anyone who wants a test can get a test. That was, and still is, untrue. And his own officials were quick to correct him. Regardless, anxious people still flooded into hospitals seeking tests that did not exist. People wanted to be tested even if they weren't symptomatic, or if they sat next to someone with a cough, says Saskia Poboski of George Mason University who worked to prepare hospitals for the pandemic. Others just had colds, but doctors still had to use it to use masks to examine them, burning through their already dwindling supplies. It really stressed the healthcare system. But Poscu says, even now, as the capacity extends, the tests must be used carefully. The first priority, says Mark Lepage of Harvard, is to test healthcare workers and hospitalized patients, allowing hospitals to quell any ongoing fires. Only later, once the immediate crisis is slowing, should tests be deployed in a more widespread way. This isn't going to be. Let us get tests out there, Inglesby says. Oh my fucking. We're only halfway there, guys, so if you want to leave now, you can. But this is a fucking podcast. The podcast is supposed to last 1 hour. We got this, fam. What the fuck? I should just fucking, stream this shit and, hang out with people and get reviews. But, okay. We're gonna do this shit, man. These measures will take time, during which... Yeah, it will really take time to do this fucking thing. During which the pandemic will either accelerate beyond the capacity of healthcare systems or to slow, containable levels. It is its course, and the nation's faith now depends on the third need, which is social distancing. Think of it this way. There are only two groups of Americans. Group A includes everyone involved in the medical response, whether that's treating patients, running tests, or manufacturing supplies. Group B includes everyone else, and their job is to buy Group A more time. Group B must now flatten the curve by physically isolating themselves from everyone to cut off chains of transmission. Given the slow fuse of COVID-19 to forestall the future collapse of healthcare system, these seemingly drastic steps must be taken immediately before they proportionate, and they must continue for several weeks. AKA 1 more week, because next week, our gym's gonna fucking open. This crisis could last 18 months, be prepared. Fuck that shit. Persuading a country to voluntarily stay at home is not easy, and without clear guidance from the White House, mayors, governors, and business owners have been forced to take their own steps. Some states have been banned large gatherings or closed schools and restaurants. At least 21 have now instituted some form of mandatory quarantine, compelling people to stay at home, and yet many citizens continue to crowd in public spaces. In these moments where the good of all hinges on the sacrifices of many, clear coordination matters. The fourth urgent need. The importance of social distancing must be impressed upon the public, who must also be reassured and informed. Instead, Trump has repeatedly played down the problem, telling America that we have it very well under control, when we do not. In that cases, we're going to be down close to zero, when they were rising. In some cases, as with his claims about ubiquitous testing, his misleading gaffes have deepened the crisis. He has even touted unproven medications. Well, first of all, that's Donald Trump, man. Everything he says is right. So, our minds, we have the power to manifest this virus. So we're making it stronger than it actually is. I mean, yeah, science and shit is real, but it's only given the power we give it. So, whatever Trump says, listen to it. This fucking media is probably a liberal, but fuck it, I'm gonna read it. Away from the White House press room, Trump has apparently been listening to Anthony Fauci, the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Fauci had advised every president since Ronald Reagan on a new epidemics and now sits on the COVID-19 task force that meets with Trump roughly every other day. He's got his own style, let's leave it at that, Fauci told me, but any kind of recommendation that I've made this far, the substance of it, he has listened to everything. But Trump already seems to be wavering. In recent days, he has signaled that he is prepared to backtrack on social distancing policies in a bid to protect the economy. Pundits and business leaders have used similar rhetoric, arguing that high-risk people, such as elderly, could be protected while low-risk people are allowed to go back to work. Such thinking is seductive but flawed. It overestimates our ability to assess a person's risk and to somehow wall off the high-risk people from the rest of society. It underestimates how badly the virus can hit low-risk groups, and how thoroughly hospitals will be overwhelmed even if just younger demographics are falling sick. A recent analysis from the University of Pennsylvania has estimated that even if social distancing measures can reduce infection rates by 95%, 960,000 Americans will still need intensive care. There are only about 180,000 ventilators in the U.S., and more pertainingly, only enough respiratory therapists and critical care staff to safely look at 100,000 ventilated patients. Abandoning social distancing would be foolish. Abandoning it now when tests and protective equipment are still scarce would be catastrophic. If Trump stays the course, if Americans adhere to social distancing, if testing can be rolled out and if enough masks can be produced, there is a chance that the country can still avert the worst predictions about COVID-19 and at least temporarily bring the pandemic under control. No one knows how long it will take, but it won't be that quick. It could be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks and up to 3 months. Fauci said, but I won't have the great confidence in that range. Fuck. Okay. Even a perfect response won't end the pandemic. As long as the virus persists somewhere, there's a chance that one infected traveler will reignite fresh sparks in countries that have already extinguished their fires. That is already happening in China, Singapore, and other Asian countries that briefly seem to have the virus under control. Under these conditions, there are 3 possible endgames: one that's very unlikely, one that's very dangerous, and one that's very long. So we just need to nuke fucking China, get everyone with the virus one place, nuke the shit out of them, start a new world. JK, but I mean, come on. Oh shit, man. The first is every nation manages to simultaneously bring the virus to a heel, as with the original SARS in 2003. Given how widespread the coronavirus pandemic is and how badly many countries are faring, the odds of a worldwide synchronous control seems vanishingly small. The second is that the virus does what the past flu pandemics have done. It burns through the world and leaves behind enough immune survivors that it would eventually struggle to find viable hosts. The herd immunity scenario would be quick and thus tempting, but it would come at a terrible cost. The SARS-CoV-2 is more transmissible and fatal than the flu. It would likely leave behind many millions of corpses and a trail of devastated health systems. The United Kingdom initially seemed to consider the herd immunity strategy before backtracking when models revealed the dire consequences. The US now seems to be considering it too. The third scenario is that the world plays a protracted game of whack-a-mole with the virus, stamping out outbreaks here and there until the vaccine can be produced. That is the best option, but also the longest and most complicated. It depends for a start on making the vaccine. If this were a flu pandemic, that would be easier. The world is experiencing at making flu vaccines and does so every year. But there are no existing vaccines for coronavirus until now. These viruses seem to cause diseases that were mild to rare. So researchers must start from the scratch. The first steps have been impressively quick. Last Monday, a possible vaccine created by Moderna and National Institutes of Health went into the early clinical testing. That marks a 63 gap between scientists sequencing the virus's genes for the first time and the doctors injecting a vaccine candidate into a person's arm. It is overwhelmingly the world record. But it's also the fastest step among the subsequent slow ones. The initial trail will simply tell researchers that the vaccine seems safe and it can be actually mobilize the immune system. Researchers will then need to check that it actually prevents infection from the SARS-CoV-2. They'll need to do animal tests and large-scale trials to ensure that the vaccine doesn't have severe side effects. It just feels like a fucking project. We have a group project that you had 3 months to work on, and you just present the day of. And everyone's just fucking winging it right now. What the fuck, guys? What the fuck? And see, this is why this is why we're depending too much on people. And yeah, that's one of the weaknesses. Like, we're letting these people just fucking do it. When we should be the one in control of this shit. Like, relying too much on doctors and the expertise of others. And we are just unprepared, man. This is just ridiculous. This is like, they're getting an F. The world is getting an F. If God were testing the economics, this is a fucking F. They'll need to work out what doses required, how many shots people need, if the vaccine in elderly people, and if it requires other chemicals to boost the effectiveness. But even if it works, they don't have an easy way to manufacture it at a massive scale, said Seth Berkley of Gavi. That's because the Moderna is using a new approach to vaccination. Existing vaccines work by providing the body with an inactivated or fragmented virus, allowing the immune system to prep its defense ahead of time. By contrast, Moderna's vaccine comprises a sliver of SARS-CoV-2 genetic material, its RNA. The idea is that the body uses sliver to build up um, its own viral fragments that would then form the basis of the immune system's preparations. This approach works in animals but is unproven in humans. By contrast, French scientists are trying to modify the existing measles vaccine using fragments of the new coronavirus. The advantage of this, it's like we're trying to fix these, messing with the fucking viruses, and it creates another virus, like coronavirus. Let's fucking make a Miller Lite virus. Let's make a Bud Light virus. Like, what the fuck, guys? You're messing with this shit. You don't understand it. The advantage of that is that we needed hundreds of doses tomorrow. A lot of plants in the world know how to do it. Berkeley said no matter which strategy is faster, Berkeley and other estimates that it will take 12 to 18 months to develop a proven vaccine, then longer still to make it, ship it, and inject it into people's arms. Oh my god. What the fuck? Okay. We got this, man. It is likely then that the new coronavirus will be a lingering part of American life for at least a year, if not much longer. If the current round of social distancing measure works, the pandemic may ebb enough for things to return to a semblance of normalcy. Offices could fill and bars could bustle, schools could reopen, and friends could reunite. But as the status quo returns, so too will the virus. This doesn't mean that society will be in continuous lockdown until 2022, but we need to be prepared to do multiple periods of social distancing, says Stephen Kaiser of Harvard. Much about the coming years, including the frequency, duration, and timings of the social upheavals, depends on two properties of the virus, both of which are currently unknown. First, seasonality. Coronaviruses tend to be winter infections that wane or disappear in the summer. This may also be true for SARS-CoV-2. The seasonal variations might not be sufficiently slow the virus when it has too many immunology naive nodes, in fact, but much of the world is waiting anxiously to see if anything the summer does to the transmission of Northern Hemisphere. Says Maya Mahumber of Harvard Medical School and Boston Children's Hospital. Second, duration of immunity. When people are infected with the milder human coronaviruses that cause cold-like symptoms, they remain immune for less than a year. By contrast, the few who are infected by the original SARS virus, which was far more severe, stayed immune for longer. Okay. Assuming that the SARS-CoV-2 lies somewhere in the middle, people who recover from these encounters might be protected for a couple of years. To confirm that, scientists will need to develop accurate serological tests which look for the antibodies that confer immunity. They'll also need to confirm that such antibodies actually stop people from catching or spreading the virus. If so, immune citizens can return to work, care for the vulnerable, and anchor the economy during bouts of social distancing. Fuck me. Wow. We are 80% there, guys. Can we even fucking do this shit? What the fuck? Okay, we got this. We're gonna pound it, man. We're gonna pound it like you fucking pound that fucking hot chick. Alright. Scientists can use the periods between those bouts to develop antiviral drugs, although drugs are rarely panacreas and come with the possible side effects and the risk of resistance. Hospitals can stockpile the necessary supplies. Testing kits can be widely distributed to catch the virus return as quickly as possible. There's no reason that the US should let the SARS-CoV-2 catch it unawares again, and thus no reason that social distancing measures need to be deployed, as broadly and handled as they must now. As Aaron E. Carroll and Abshish Jha recently wrote, we can keep schools and businesses open as much as possible, closing them quickly when suppression fails, then opening them back on once the infected and identified are isolated. Instead of playing defense, we could play more offense. Hell yeah, I love this guy, Aaron E. Carroll and Ashish E. Jha. You are the man and woman, or man and man. Whether through accumulating herd immunity or a long-awaited arrival of a vaccine, the virus will find spreading explosively more and more difficult. It is unlikely to disappear entirely. The vaccine may need to be updated as the virus changes, and people may need to get revaccinated on a regular basis, as they currently do for the flu. The model suggests, you know what? I've never gotten sick. I've never gotten the flu. I've never gotten the vaccine. So I'm hoping that the coronavirus is just like that. And fuck that, man. Like, okay. Um, COVID may become like the flu it is today, a recurring scourge of winter. Perhaps it will eventually become so mundane that even though the vaccine exists, large swaths of Gen Z won't bother getting it, forgetting how dramatically their world was molded by its absence. So this could be like what the press is doing, just kind of infiltrating our media and making it bigger than what it is, and just fucking everyone up. The last part, the aftermath. The cost of reaching that point with a few deaths is possible will be enormous. As my colleague Annie Laurie wrote, the economy is experiencing a shock more sudden and severe than anyone alive has experienced. About 1 in 5 people in the United States have lost working hours or jobs. Hotels are empty, airlines are grounding flights, restaurants and other small businesses are closing. Inequalities will widen. People with low incomes will be hardest hit by the social distancing measures and most likely to have chronic health conditions that increase their risk of severe health infections. Diseases have destabilized cities and societies many times over, but it hasn't happened in this country in a very long time, or to quite the extent that we're seeing now, says Elena Conis, a historian of medicine at UC Berkeley. We're far more urban and metropolitan. We have more people traveling great distances and living far from work and family. After infections began ebbing, the secondary pandemic of mental health problems will follow, a moment of profound dread and uncertainty. People are being cut off from soothing human contact. Hugs, handshakes, and other social rituals are now tingled with danger. People with anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder are struggling. Other people who are already excluded from the much of public life are being asked to distance themselves even further, deepening their loneliness. Asian people are suffering from racist insults, fueled by the president who insists on labeling their new coronavirus the Chinese virus. Incidents of domestic violence and child abuse are likely to spike as people are forced to stay in unsafe homes. Children whose bodies are mostly spared by the virus may endure mental trauma that stays with them in adulthood. After the pandemic, people who recover from the COVID-19 might be shunned and stigmatized as survivors of Ebola, SARS, and HIV. Healthcare workers will take time to heal 1 or 2 years after the SARS hit Toronto. People who dealt with an outbreak will still be far less productive and more likely to experience burnout and post-traumatic stress. People who went through long bouts of quarantine will carry the scars of their experience. My colleagues in Wuhan note that some people there now refuse to leave their homes and have developed agoraphobia, says Stephen Taylor of the University of British Columbia, who wrote The Psychology of Pandemics. But there is also the potential for a much better world after we get through this, says Richard Danzig of the Center of New American Security. Already, communities are finding new ways of coming together, even as they must stay apart. Attitudes to health may also change to better. The rise of HIV and AIDS completely changed sexual behavior among young people who were coming into sexual maturity at the height of the pandemic. The use of condoms became normalized. Testing for STDs became mainstream. Similarly, washing your hands for 20 seconds, a habit that historically has been hard to enshrine, even in hospitals, may be one of those behaviors that we become accustomed to in the course of this outbreak that we don't think about them. Conan adds, well, that's a blessing. The whole thing we're learning about the pandemic is just to fucking wash your hands for 20 seconds. Really? What the fuck? Or how about knowing it's a fucking scam? Yeah. Globalist agenda. Which, well, then again, the globalists must be smart. They kind of control your life. Of your essentials, necessities, we don't produce our own goods. We rely on grocery stores and shit. So now, everything that all businesses that exist now that can only survive now are connected to China in one way or the other. There's international elements kind of infiltrating our system so we can be fucking communists. It's real, motherfucker. It's real. I can see it. You should see it too. Pandemics can be catalyzed social change. People, businesses, and institutions have been remarkably quick to adapt or call for practices they may not have once dragged their heads on, including working from home, conference calling to accommodate people with disabilities, proper sick leave, and flexible childcare arrangements. This is the first time in my lifetime I've heard someone say, oh, if you're sick, stay home. And we're coming to an end, hopefully. Says Adia Benton, an anthropologist at Northwestern University. Perhaps the nation will learn that preparedness isn't just about mass vaccines and tests, but also about fair labor policies. In a stable and equal healthcare system, perhaps it will appreciate the healthcare workers and the public health specialists compose America's social immune system, and that this has been suppressed. Aspects of America's identity may be need rethinking after the COVID 19, and bam, drum rolls, here is the scam. Here is when China infiltrates us. Many of the country's values have seemed to work against it during the pandemic. This is when they try to transform us, guys. I knew it. I fucking knew it. The liberals, they're trying to turn away from our individualism, our capitalism, our way, our American dream to do what we want. And instead, guess what? We have to lose our individuality. So, for the greater good of everyone. What the fuck is this shit, man? What the fuck? Its individualism, exceptionalism, and tendency to equate doing whatever you want with an act of resistance meant that when it came time to save lives and stay indoors, people flocked to bars and clubs. So, yeah, you know what? We might have shot ourselves in the foot. Maybe this virus is real and we fucked up, but we will not capitulate with this fucking communist bullcrap. We're fucking Americans. We're gonna fucking rule the world. And you hate us because you ain't us. Alright? Having internalized years of anti-terrorism messaging following 9/11, Americans resolved to not live in fear, but SARS-CoV-2 has no interest in their terror, only themselves. Years of isolationist rhetoric had bad consequences too. Citizens who saw China as a distant, different place where bats are edible and authoritarianism is acceptable failed to consider that they would be next or that they wouldn't be ready. China's response to the crisis had its own problem, but that's for another time. People believed the rhetoric that containment would work. How evil is that? Let's say China was lying about their numbers. The virus is really bad. You can see bodies from space. Um, and they were like, oh, let's send a fucking traveler to Italy in the US and infect everyone. How fucking sick is that? That's so irresponsible. China should have closed down their borders. We know that. They were irresponsible. They sent us a motherfucking virus. We need to go to war to them, nuke the shit out of them. That way we don't have to worry about them attacking us while we're fucking here. Because when our nation is weak, when we're out of soldiers to defend us, who the fuck's gonna defend us and fight for our country, guys? We're gonna be outnumbered. We're all gonna be fucking sick. We need to nuke them now. We need to nuke every fucking country. And while we can, because if everyone's gonna be sick, how the fuck are we gonna fight? All right, so um, we keep them out, and we'll be okay. When you have a body politic that buys into these ideas of isolationism and ethno nationalism, you're especially vulnerable when a pandemic hits. Veterans of past epidemics have long warned that American society is trapped in a cycle of panic and neglect. After every crisis, anthrax, SARS, flu, Ebola, attention is paid and investments are made, but after short periods of peacetime, memories fade and budgets dwindle. This trend transcends red and blue administrations. When a new normal sets in, the abnormal once again becomes unimaginable. But there is reason to think that COVID 19 might be a disaster and that leads to more radical and lasting changes. The other major epidemics of recent decades either barely affected the US, SARS, MERS, Ebola, were milder than expected, H1N1 flu in 2008, or were mostly limited to just specific groups of people, Zika, HIV. The COVID 19 pandemic, by contrast, is affecting everyone directly, changing the nature of their everyday life. My life's the same, man. Work, gym, and fucking photography. Nothing has changed for me. They distinguish, well, other than the gym being closed. They distinguish us as not only made from other diseases, but also from other systematic challenges of our time, and the administration prevaricates on climate change. The effects won't be felt for years, but even then it will be hard to parse. It's different when a president says that everyone can get a test, and one day later everyone cannot. Pandemics are democratizing experiences. People whose privilege and power would normally shield them from a crisis are facing quarantines, testing positive, and losing loved ones. Senators are falling sick. The consequences of defending public health agencies, losing expertise, and stretching hospitals are no longer manifesting as angry opinion pieces, but as faltering lungs. I think we're finally done. Two more pages. After 9/11, the world focused on counterterrorism. After COVID-19, attention may shift to public health. Expect to see a spike in funding for virology and vaccinology, a surge in students applying to healthcare programs, and more domestic production of medical supplies. Your mind, your spirit kind of controls your body, like your cells and shit. So, like, if you have dominion over your spirit, it's less likely you'll be sick. I'm just saying you can't be happy and sick at the same time. Expect pandemics to top the agenda of the United Nations General Assembly. Anthony Fauci is now a household name. Regular people who think easily about the policewoman or firefighter finally gets what an epidemiologist does, says Monica Schoen-Spana, a medical anthropologist at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Such changes in themselves might protect the world from the next inevitable disease. The countries that had lived through SARS had public consciousness about this and has allowed them to leap into action, said Ron Klain, the former Ebola czar. The most commonly uttered sentence in America at the moment is, "I've never seen anything like this before." This wasn't a sentence anyone in Hong Kong uttered. For the US and for the world, it's abundantly, viscerally clear what a pandemic can do. The lessons that America draws from this experience are hard to predict, especially at a time when online algorithms and partisan broadcasters only serve news that aligns with their audience preconceptions. Such dynamics will be pivotal in the coming months, says Alan Goldsberg, a foreign policy expert at the Center for a New American Security. Transitions after the World War II or 9/11 were not about a bunch of new ideas. The ideas are out there, but the debates will be more acute over the next few months because of the fluidity of the moment and willingness of the American public to accept big, massive changes. One could easily conceive of a world in which most of the nations believes that America defeated COVID-19. Despite his many lapses, Trump's approval rating has surged. Imagine that he succeeds in diverting blame for the crisis to China, casting it as a villain and America as the resilient hero. During the second term of his presidency, the U.S. turns further inward and pulls out NATO and other international alliances, builds actual and figurative walls, and disinvests in other nations. As Gen Z grows up, the foreign plague replaced communists and terrorists as the new generation threat. One could also envisage a future in which America learns a different lesson, a communal spirit. I knew it. This press, I don't even know why I'm reading it. It's fucking, what a liberal. Ironically born through social distancing, causes people to turn outward to neighbors, both foreign and domestic. The election of November 2020 becomes a repudiation of America's first politics. The nation pivots as it did after World War II, from isolationism to international cooperations. Buoyed by steady investments and an influx of the brightest minds, the healthcare workforce surges. Gen Z kid writes school essays about growing up to be epidemiologists. Public health becomes the centerpiece of foreign policy. The U.S. leads a new global partnership focused in solving challenges like pandemics and climate change. In 2030, SARS-CoV emerges free from nowhere and is brought to heel within a month. Heck yeah. We got it, fam. Thank you for listening, guys. So what did you guys think about it? Is it a scam? Is it not? Leave a comment below. You got this, fam. Daily Flux, Anthony Flux, out.